Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm and you are watching second part of What If Naruto Becomes No Life King. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Naruto, sitting on the alabaster throne, said, if she didn't have such a big head, I might like her a lot more than I do now. It was in the throne room of the White Castle in his Mindscape, which was at the end of a long hall. Widabra was floating around on a bed of darkness with the vampire while he slept. She just wants to leave, and I don't really blame her, she said, turning over to face him. To be honest, talking to Widabra at first was a little bit scary. She was as nice as could be, but she could get angry quickly. She did her best to stay in her wing of the castle or in the town around it, which she had built. After a while, it was actually pretty fun, but talking to a naked girl who looked 11 years younger than you was always weird at first. She was only 4 feet 5 inches tall, had pale white skin, and silver hair that fell to her mid-back. When she first met her current wielder, she willed her hair to cover her non-existent breasts, even if she lay on her side, but she doesn't do that anymore. Still, I wish she could see why I don't use my true form. The instincts and bloodlust might give her a thrill, but it's... He trailed off, looking for the right word. Disturbing? Said Widabra, twirling a bit of her hair as she floated. Even more than that. I don't know how Alucard could take it, he said, resting his chin on his fist. Then again, my humanity is still fresh in my mind. His died long before the Hellsing organization, and Kyuubi-chan never had any. You hate her because of her wants, but you like her because of her soul, even though you know that her wants are part of her soul. Do you ever make sense, my dear wielder? Widabra asked him with a sly smile. He muttered, I guess I make as much sense as I need to, as he looked out the stained glass windows at the end of the throne room. A vampire in a white castle with a lot of sunlight is a common stereotype that is. This is arousing. Naruto gave the sword a half glare and said, then go ask your harem to fix the problem. You know damn well I'm not going to help. One more time, this is not a harem. We're a group of lovers. She replied in a childish way, which was kind of strange given the subject. Still, Widabra was thousands of years old, so if she wanted to have sex looking like she was 9, he figured it was her choice. He did have to wonder why all 9 of her lovers looked like they were the same age, but he figured it was up to each woman to do what she wanted. Alright. Nothing changes. If you have an itch, just ask them to scratch it. He sighed and looked back at the windows. Pedophilia isn't my thing. You say that now, but you might think differently in a few hundred years, when you die and I get your soul, she reminded him as she rolled onto her back and put her hands behind her head. He muttered, great, I'm going to be raped by a loli, loudly enough for a ball of shadows to be thrown at him. He leaned to the side and let it go by. Do you have to be so down on it? The first time Taliana and I fucked, she was nervous, but I made us look older. Then I slowly made us younger until we were again perfect. Why do you keep insisting on being such a terrible age? What's so bad about 20? Naruto asked, half offended. On the other hand, this could be his chance to find out why she insisted on walking around as a naked child. Good and bad or so. At that age, black and white is no fun at all. Everyone is a pessimist in this world, especially. People always say things like, that's bad, that's evil, this isn't good, etc. And what, my dear sword, makes it better or even okay to walk around naked as a 9-year-old girl? He wondered. There's a time in everyone's life, usually before they start becoming adults or puberty, when they don't know the difference between good and evil. Kids know that killing is wrong, but they don't know the difference between love and sex. They just know that both involve someone they care about and make them feel great. There are no hidden motives or dividing lines between actions. Life is simple and clear. She told him, there are just things that make you happy and things that don't. She did this because she knew he was sensitive about pedophilia, and she wanted to at least tell him why she had been so mean to him. That makes sense, in a strange way. Since most of your wielders come from places and times where there is a lot of war, you give those who join you a simpler, happier life. Naruto said, it's like a child's logic, but it's a good thing in the end. Seriously, though, if I catch you fucking in the throne room again, I'll put my boot up your ass. He glared at the spirit, who was nervously laughing and putting her hands up to try to calm him down. That was Rinnea's idea, not mine, she said, sitting up. Naruto would never hurt her, even though he knew she wasn't a little girl. It was one of the things she liked about him. She even had a body made to hold his soul, but he would be the first guy to join. Do you want to keep the castle? So many come to mind. I swear to Cammy that if you say the word, sex games, I'll throw crap at you. Big shite, he said, tapping his stone arm rest with his finger. Like this. So pure. She moved and said, I like that. I think I'll go scratch that itch. Cammy knows that Taliana was itchy when I left. Naruto didn't know what bothered him more as she floated away, that she was going to have sex with a childlike elf girl, or that she had started to finger herself right before she turned the corner and disappeared from his sight. Sometimes, I think she's a little too open about sex, he facepalmed and sighed. Out of all the sword spirits, he got the pedophile. Then again, since they were all of legal age, with the youngest being in her early 200s, and they all looked like children, was it really pedophilia or just sex? He muttered as he stood up and left. He was going down to the dungeons because the castle was big and empty, which made every sound last longer and be louder. He had heard Widabra and her lovers enough times to know that the dungeons were the only place to go if he didn't want to hear things that shouldn't be said in a child's voice. As he went down the levels, the stone got darker, and he knew that the only things down here were, as Widabra put it, pessimistic killers. He stopped at the fork in the hall, knowing that one path led to Kyuubi's cage and the other to Alucard's memories. The former no-life king had somehow managed to keep himself alive in his own memories, much to his own regret. It was only a small part of his soul, but as a thank you to the old vampire, Naruto gave him the power to make anything he wanted appear in the room, whether it was wine or a shooting range. Since he couldn't be used as a familiar, which Naruto was still trying to do with other souls, Naruto mostly just left him to cry. He checked in on him every now and then to see if the vampire had found a way to die that wouldn't make Naruto lose a lot of power, but he didn't think it would be a good time. He could leave his mindscape and wake up, but he needed rest if he was going to have to deal with the Uchiha. If he woke up, there would be echoes of Widabra's sexual adventures in the back of his mind until they stopped, which could take hours. At least Kyuubi didn't yell about how much rougher or faster she wanted it. Naruto said, "Good evening, Kyuubi-chan," which woke the fox up from her thoughts. The cage was simple. 3 walls of stone and 1 of iron bars. There was a door near the left wall that was so small compared to the Kyuubi's size that it was almost funny. The keyhole was covered with a piece of seal paper. "Why do you have to call me that?" she asked, sounding pretty annoyed, but he had never seen her in any other mood than annoyed, angry, or sad. "What do they call you, Kyuubi-chan?" he asked with a smile, even though he knew it made her mad. "I'm the strongest of the bijou. You shouldn't call me by such a personal name. I'm Kyuubi-sama to you, mortal," she said, giving the vampire an angry look. "Why?" Kyuubi growled and swiped at the bars with her claws, making a loud clang when they hit the metal. The bars weren't even scratched, though, and her angry tails were flapping behind her. "Because I'm ahead of you. I am the queen of the bijou, and you are nothing but a..." Naruto said, "I am the no-life king, the strongest vampire alive, and the leader of 3 races." This cut her off and made her even more angry. "Your powers don't come close to mine," she called out. "Why do you hate me so much?" He sighed, making a chair appear. He sat down and rested his right cheek on his fist, looking at the Kyuubi. He didn't think she had figured it out, since the Kyuubi was the main focus of her brooding, which was why he could sit there for hours, listen to her scream, shout, and growl, and then walk away smiling. A jailer will always be hated by a prisoner. All you are to me is a mortal, and none of this would have happened if your father hadn't been so stupid as to call the Shinigami. Is it important? The past can't be changed by moping about the present. Bah. That's a strong argument from someone who lives in their past mistakes. I've never said that I wasn't hypocritical. But tell me, Kyuubi-chan, if I lived through 4 mistakes, do you live through 20 years? Does every second of being locked up give you another reason to cry? He asked as he saw her anger grow. Because if that's true, you're really just mourning the present. Be quiet, vampire. I don't feel sad, and I don't live in the past 20 years of this hell. Then why do you dislike me? Naruto asked, looking her in the eye. If a prisoner hates her jailer, it should be because she is sad to be in jail. If she isn't sad and doesn't cry, as you say she doesn't, why would she waste her time telling a lie about how much she hates her jailer? She was about to say something when Naruto got up, his chair vanished behind him, and turned to leave. Call me your jailer if that makes your time easier to deal with. Call me immortal if that makes you feel important. Call it hatred if that will keep you sane. You, Tsukiko Averin, are my faith, he told her as he walked away without looking at her. I don't call you my prisoner, my tenant, or my demon. Kyuubi stopped moving and looked shocked as he watched his body move away. How? How could he tell? She asked, shocked beyond her anger of 20 years. It had been 897 years, and she had never told anyone. It had been lost in the sands of time, leaving her with no name but Kyuubi no Kitsune. So how did he know? How did he know what her name was? Real life. Naruto's eyes popped open as he came back from his Mindscape. Weedabra had cut the itch-scratching short, which made Naruto very happy. He put up mental walls to block out Kyuubi, Weedabra, and Alucard if he ever left his basement. Weedabra could easily get around the walls if he was holding her sword, but she could tell what he was thinking, so she stayed behind them. Also, with the walls up, as long as they were quiet, she could go back and help Valanth. She was glad she could make anything she needed inside the castle. When you're screwing a screamer, nothing quiets them down like a ball gag. Naruto got up and put Weedabra's sheath back on his belt before walking out of the room. He walked like a machine, each step measured and meaningless. The rising sun showed that he hadn't slept as long as he had wanted, so he would have to wait a little longer for Sasuke. He walked east, walking up a building's wall and across its roof like they were nothing. The only time he picked up speed was when he jumped gaps, but he quickly lost it when he landed. Soon, though, he jumped over the small town wall and landed on the soft grass on the other side. And so the heavens wept for him when they saw the monster who couldn't cry, he said with a smile as the rain started to fall. It was only a light drizzle, but that didn't stop him from smiling at the clouds as he walked to the field by the river to wait for Sasuke. The rain didn't let up as he walked, but it didn't exactly get worse. A human would have wanted an umbrella. He took off his haori and let it turn back into shadows, reveling in the feeling of rain of his pale skin. Soon enough, he found himself at the proper place, and he noticed a tree by the river. Its leaves provided some shelter from the rain, and he half wondered if Weedabra would mind if he set her against the tree while he stood in the rain. It's not like all rust, she said with a smile. Valanth hadn't been in the mood, and Weedabra never forced any of them. She adapted to their sexual desires, or lack of them, as much as they did to hers. Still, it was nice to see Naruto happy after all the bad feelings he'd been having lately. It wasn't as good as having sex with an elf, but she liked to see him happy. And few things made him happier than rain. Weedabra had called him out on it once. He told her it was the most childish thing he did with his time, and he made sure to do it every time it rained. He would take off any clothes on his body, including his Anbu mask, and look up with his eyes closed. When she asked him why that was childish, he just smiled. That's where I like to stand. She remembered him saying, pretend that the water running down my cheeks is my own tears. It was strange and over the top, but she was moved by it. Maybe it was because Naruto really couldn't cry. He sighed, lowered his head, and closed his eyes. In his mind, he saw a scene just like the field, the same grass, the same river, the same tree, and the same rain. The only thing that was different was the woman in front of him. He could never see her face or what she was wearing, but when she stepped forward, he did what he always did. One hand went to a waist that wasn't there and the other to a hand that reached out. Then they started to dance. Naruto knew from Itachi and Kakashi, who were there, that he looked like an idiot when he did it. It wasn't because he was bad at dancing. In fact, he was quite good at classical dancing. They just thought it was funny to see a shirtless vampire dancing in the rain with a woman who wasn't there. Still, he didn't care, and he danced for about 30 minutes before his smile got bigger. Sometimes, you just have to stop caring what other people think, he said loudly enough for Sasuke-san to hear over the rain. Think of that as the first lesson. The Uchiha was surprised that the man could feel him even though his eyes were closed. He was standing under a black umbrella. You should have an umbrella. You might get sick, he said almost silently. Naruto stopped dancing and turned to the Uchiha with a smile that hadn't changed. It's nice that you care, and it might be proof of what Kakashi told me, but it's not necessary in my case. He said, I can't get sick, and with a wave of his hand, he made another hauri. Sasuke was surprised by the action and was about to ask, but Naruto stopped him with a hand. Second lesson. Being social doesn't mean you have to tell everyone everything. Sasuke nodded, then looked like he was trying to swallow his pride for a moment before bowing. I feel like I owe you an apology, he said, and the words almost sounded foreign. For the way you behaved at school that day? He walked over to the boy and said, not at all. Come on, if I'm going to teach you a few things about talking to people, we should find someone for you to talk to, he said as he turned around and headed back towards Tanzuki-gai. Why can't we just chat? He asked, catching up by jogging for a moment. I'm flattered, but I feel like I should let you know that I'm straight, he told the Uchiha with a fox grin. Sasuke stuttered, aye. But he couldn't come up with a good reason. He hadn't meant it that way, and he was straight, but no one had ever taken a comment that way before. Third lesson. Chill out. If I thought you were hitting on me, I would have gotten rid of it a lot faster, Naruto said, which made the Uchiha sigh angrily. So why are you out so early? Can't sleep. After Tsukiyomi, sometimes it's hard to sleep, Sasuke said. Naruto sighed when his old friend brought up the fact that Itachi had always been good at genjutsu. Sasuke wasn't ready to hear about what happened that night. Or was he? The boy was 16 years old, and whatever he had learned was probably still fresh in his mind. This might have been the best time to tell him. Mr. Sasuke, what kind of insight did you get? Kakashi was as hard to understand as a stoned prophet. The boy moved around uncomfortably as they walked toward the gate. He hadn't heard Haku say anything about Itachi, and he wasn't sure how to explain how he felt about what Haku had said and done. I met someone in Wave. A boy named Haku, he began, but he didn't know how to say it in a way that didn't make him sound stupid. Sasuke, forget about being stupid for a second. Tell me what happened and how you felt, Naruto asked him when he could tell he was hesitating. The boy sighed and nodded, then put his free hand in his pocket. One night, a few days after Zabuza's attack, I had trained so hard that I fell asleep. All of the official facts are in the report, but when I fell asleep in the woods, he woke me up. He told me that sleeping like that on the forest floor could make me sick. I guess your answer wasn't all that friendly. No. People were always worried about me, and I was sick of it. I won't say what I just said, and I wish I could apologize for saying it. Still, he asked me why I was in the woods in the first place. I told him I was working out to get stronger. He bit his lip because he knew this didn't sound like a grand revelation. He told me that I must have a lot of important people in my life if I was training that hard. I told him I was going to the gym for myself. Naruto asked, bad results? Not many people were out today, but since the festival was last weekend, most of them are probably still sleeping off their hangovers. He sounded like he was sad. He asked me if I knew what gave people real strength. No one has ever asked me a tougher question. As I looked at him, I could think of 1,000,001 things to say, but I couldn't say any of them. He smiled and told me, real strength doesn't come from jutsu, muscles, or hate. It comes from people you love and would do anything to protect. I told him that all the people I cared about were dead. He shook his head and said, I saw you with Team 7. He stopped and looked at the vampire to make sure he was still listening. I've called the team a stepping stone so many times that it's not funny, but sometimes it was just more. At first, I thought maybe it was because I was tired. Then, during the fight on the bridge, Haku beat the crap out of me. I was shocked when I was able to knock off his mask. Then, when a variety of senbon in a variety of places made the world dark, it just sort of clicked. Even though it doesn't sound very impressive. The next morning, when I woke up, my first thought was, damn. I'm an idiot with nothing to do. I'll admit that you tell pretty bad stories, but I kind of get it. Naruto patted the shorter guy on the back and said, some things don't have words. They just work, and no one else gets it. But what are you going to do now? He said with a sigh, in reality, I've apologized to everyone I thought deserved it, and I hope that my efforts to be a good person will make up for the rest. Still, it's hard to forget how badly you wanted to kill someone for so many years. It's been about 5 years. Naruto said, there are worse times in the world. Hey, Sasuke, your headband is on, right? I have it on me. He took it out of his pocket and said, I didn't want to get it wet because it would rust and all that. Why are you asking? Because I'm going to buy you some drinks. Drunk people are a good place to start social training because they are easy to please and will hit or slap you if you say something wrong. There's nothing like a fight to teach you how not to talk to someone, he said as he took the boy's shoulder and turned right into a bar. Okay, show me your ID, kid. The bouncer, who was half hidden in a nook by the door flaps, asked them as he stepped out to stop them. Naruto gave the man his Konoha headband and said, here you go. He took it and tried to bend it a little. When he realized that, like all official headbands, it was made of solid metal, he gave it back. Now you give him yours. Sasuke didn't know if he wanted to drink or not, so he thought for a moment before giving his to the other person. The same check was done, and the bouncer gave it back with a smile. Okay, they're for real. Sorry, guys, I had to make sure. You knew someone in town? He asked, folding his arms. I'm on vacation here, and Sasuke-san is taking a break with his team after a mission, Naruto said. Just so you know, this is a bar where mostly regular people hang out. We serve a little food, but mostly beer and sake. Just keep it down and don't get too loud. He said with a smirk, I'd hate to have to throw out 2 shinobi and make you look bad. If you do, just be careful not to hit my head on the doorframe. Naruto made a joke, I'd hate to damage such a nice place, which made the bouncer laugh. He went in, and Sasuke was right behind him. When they got inside the tavern, Sasuke liked the atmosphere. It was dark, but there was a makeshift stage where a few people were playing music to set the mood. There were tables in the middle and booths along the walls. Naruto chose a booth near the door because there weren't many people here. As Sasuke sat down across from him, he noticed that Naruto didn't have a drop of water on him. When the waitress came over, Naruto smiled and told her, not nearly enough for a hands-on lesson. Oh, how he wanted to use her blood to paint the walls. She asked in a cute way, what can I get you too? Naruto looked into her eyes and smiled as she suddenly lost track of where she was. Sasuke, when I look away from you, I'll order a beer. I don't care what you order, but I want you to try to talk to this girl. She just broke up with her boyfriend and wants some company, if you get what I mean, Naruto said, still looking into the waitress's eyes. And Nani? Sasuke almost yelled. What the hell did he mean? Think of it as a crash course in how to get along with people you don't know. Just smile and say things that will make her feel good about herself without making you look like a creep, he said with a smirk as he looked at the price list on the wall. The waitress seemed to come out of her trance without remembering that she had been in one. Would you like a beer? He said with a happy smile, I have nothing better to do than get drunk. I know how you feel. And you, sir? She asked Sasuke as she turned to him. To his credit, he put his own spin on Naruto's smile. The vampire couldn't help but wonder if he hadn't been practicing different ways to make faces look. Please call me Sasuke. I don't think I could handle the walls of formality and being a stranger with you, he said in a charming way. Naruto might have let his jaw drop if he hadn't been in Anbu for 9 years. Kakashi thought he had to ask for help? If the way the girls blushed is any indication, he should write a book about this. Still, he had a lot of time to do something stupid. Then, may I ask what the name of the beautiful angel in front of me is? Naruto thought to himself, almost face-palming, she's wearing a name tag, you idiot. Her name is Akemi. We have these for a reason, Sasuke-san, she said with a light laugh as she held up her small metal name tag. Excuse me, Akemi. I couldn't tear my eyes away from those turquoise gems you call eyes, he said, pointing to her eyes. Great save. Let's see if she accepts. Oh. She blushed and said, thank you. She quickly brought up her pen and notepad, though, because she remembered her job. She asked, what do you want again? Other than a chance to learn more about you? He said with a smile, I'll go get some sake. Akemi gave it back, and it looked like she was having trouble writing it down. Naruto didn't think she needed to write it down to remember it. He thought she probably just wanted a quick look at Sasuke without looking like she was staring. From what she was thinking, it seemed like she liked the attention, but she didn't know how to respond. Her last boyfriend had hooked up with her because of a friend, not because she was good at flirting. Alright. She walked away and went back to the bar to get all the orders she had gotten while walking around the bar. Why the hell did you ask me to do that, Naruto-san? I don't know what I'm doing. He said in a harsh whisper. How in the hell did you learn so much about her anyway? Jutsu is what you see. Mine can see thoughts and souls. Now, her break will start in 20 minutes. He told him, she doesn't usually leave, and she eats lunch in the booth on the other side of the room. He didn't give him time to talk. Oh, and by the way, if that little performance was no idea what I'm doing, you are good at winging it. What? He asked, totally baffled. Just go with it, Sasuke. If you do something nice for her, you'll make her day. He said this while playing with some of his silver hair. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a good amount of money, which he gave to Sasuke. I want you to pay back what you don't spend. He said, you've got to be joking. He didn't believe it, but he took the money anyway. If you don't do this, I'll make up proof that you slept with Neji Hyuga. I assume you know each other, Naruto said, making Sasuke's face go pale. Why would? Naruto stood up and walked over to Akemi. He smiled and said, you don't know anything about me, and to be honest, I can't believe I even have to say this, but be nice to that girl and treat her right. Excuse me, miss? He said to get her attention. She turned around and smiled at him. Could you cancel the beer I just ordered? Something came up that needs my attention right now. Sure, that's fine. She gave Sasuke a sneaky look and asked, is there anything else? Yeah, I know this might sound weird, but could you talk to my friend a little? He's been having a hard time lately, and some human contact might help him, don't you think? He asked her with a smile that said, sorry to bother you. Well, I can't do it at work, but I'll have a break in a few minutes, and then I'll be done in an hour. Do you think he can wait that long? She asked with a smile, as if it were a joke between them. He seemed a little forward. For someone going through a hard time, though. That's his way of hiding it. He's usually a bit shy, and most ninja have a past. If it's too much trouble, you don't have to, but at least he seems willing to talk to you. She said with a smile, "Oh, okay. I'll see what I can do." Naruto said, "Thank you." As he walked out the door, he told Sasuke, "Stay put. Do you know that you're a lousy matchmaker?" "Yep. But I wasn't trying to make things easy for him," you said to Kakashi. "I promised to try." Sasuke turned out to be a bit more advanced than I had thought. At this point, all you can do is try things out and see what works. If I just wanted to get him laid, I would have waited for the drunk women to stumble in. Bah, you don't get how complicated the art of love is, Weedabra said. No, not even close. But I wasn't trying to find him his soulmate. He'll be fine without me if he can make it through the night without getting hit. True. What about Kakashi, though? I don't know. I'll just tell him what happened and see what happens. I don't think he'll be too upset, to be honest. Weedabra just gave him a shrug and went back behind the mental wall to see about getting a massage. Naruto decided to skip the wandering and just find Kakashi, so he started walking around looking for the golden Neko inn. In all honesty, he was surprised that the urges were almost gone. Still there, of course, but he didn't think he'd feel any urges he couldn't fight. Room 153, Konoha, Hospital. How are you feeling today, Hinata? Tsunade asked as he walked in. She had heard that Hinata's therapy was going as well as expected, but she still shied away from the male nurses. Even though it had only been 3 days, Tsunade didn't want to tempt fate, so she made sure that all of Hinata's visitors were women. She wouldn't even let her father or any of her male friends into the room. Thirsty, but not bad, she said, holding the stuffed wolf Moriko that Naruto had given her to her chest. She didn't want to say it out loud, but she thought you were right about her eating problems. Well, it's not like it's a disease. You're just a picky eater. She patted her on the shoulder and said, "It's not like it'll kill anyone." I don't think that's normal, she said as she squeezed her stuffed animal. Tsunade let out a sigh and sat on the edge of the bed. Hinata, vampires have a whole different normal than humans do. She said, "It's blunt and I know it might be hard to hear, but it's the truth. Kami knows that Naruto was more scared and freaked out when he first turned into a vampire than you were." She asked. He was? Naruto's order helped her fight off the urge to reach out and rip off her head. Instead, she waited. Tsunade looked confused for a moment before she nodded. She said, "I can't tell you too much because Naruto thinks of it as kind of personal. But I can tell you a little, just a few changes in Naruto's body and mind that I remembered when I looked at his record. It might save you some testing." Hinata bit her lip and nodded because she knew she at least felt different. Now, let's start with the heart. Even though your heart doesn't beat, blood still flows through it at a slow but steady rate. I thought this was done so that it wouldn't stay the same or something. Well, Naruto's heart has been stabbed twice and he's still alive, so I guess the movies got it wrong, she joked, and the heiress gave her a half smile. I don't know if there will be any changes to your ability to have children, but Naruto can still make sperm, so you should still be able to if you want to. How do you know about Naruto's? Well, you know. It's normal for male ninja from noble clans, especially when their numbers are getting low, to have their reproductive ability checked. This is in case their numbers get so low that they need to use the Clan Restoration Act or just use artificial insemination to get more children. If they were sterile, the clan might just vanish from the world, Tsunade said. But Naruto is not a girl, so I don't know how it will affect a womb or ovaries. I can't find anything wrong with my jutsu, and I don't want to worry you, but things about Naruto's vampirism have slipped by before. Hinata asked, like what? In reality, it was easier than she thought to think about not having children or not being able to have them. She didn't want any man to touch her or for any part of a man to be inside her. Well, he's lost a lot more blood than he should have. At first, I thought it was some kind of regeneration, but it turns out that a vampire doesn't just live off of blood. They keep all the blood they drink, and if Naruto is any indication, their veins can hold a lot of blood without getting twisted. What did he go through to bleed that much? She asked, getting too close to Naruto's past for Tsunade's taste. She knew that he had to tell them some things, and she knew that he had to tell them this. She patted her on the shoulder and said, "That's something for him to explain. But, moving on, you can heal yourself, but the rate is unknown. Your skin and bones are stronger than most people's, but not in a way that would make them armor. But no matter how strong you get, your muscles will never get bigger, and you'll never gain weight. As Naruto says, you'll always be slim and beautiful." So I guess he was talking about himself? Hinata asked with a smile. He was proud of himself. Yes, Tsunade said with a laugh. Speed and accuracy should get better, but Naruto never said how. There's one more thing after that. What's that? Don't be sad. Don't tell me, I won't. No. I mean, you can't cry at all. Tsunade said, your eyes still make enough moisture to stay moist, but they never make more than just enough. Hinata blushed, which she found she could still do when she realized she had made a mistake. Thanks for telling me, Tsunade-sama. It's kind of good to know, she said in a quiet voice. It was kind of a relief to hear that she wasn't making up how she felt, and from what was said, it sounded like she would have skills that would help her career. But Tsunade-sama. Will sunlight kill me? She asked, knowing that the little bit of light that came in through the shades was annoying but not necessarily painful. I want to ask Naruto something else. I've seen him walk around during the day, but when his friend changed, they couldn't go out during the day without clouds and a hooded jacket, Tsunade said, realizing she had said too much. There's someone else? Someone else was changed by Naruto? Who? Asked Hinata, staring at Tsunade. The Kage looked away and bit her lower lip. This was at the top of the list of things not to tell her. Naruto killed an Anbu right there and then for bringing it up. It's a long story, and Naruto has to tell it, Tsunade said as she stood up. Hinata, Naruto regretted 3 things before he turned you, and this is almost certainly the 4th. During his first blood rage, he killed innocent people, he killed someone close to him, and he turned the other person I mentioned. Hinata, Naruto is a sad person who thinks he is a monster who can't find love. The only time he felt love, he accidentally killed her because she wanted sex and wouldn't move away when he asked. She could remember the night like it was yesterday. The boy had died in some way. He also made his black mask that night and became Nosferatu the Damned. He complains while he smiles, and the other person is one of the things you should avoid talking about. She asked, okay, but has he told you? This made her mad because there was another person like her, but she could only find out about it from the one who wasn't there. He brought him in so I could take care of him for the first couple of weeks, she said softly. Please don't ask again, at least not from me. Get some rest, I have to do my rounds, she said with a smile as she walked out the door. Hinata didn't say anything as the Kage left. She petted Moriko and thought about who Naruto could have turned into. There were many things he hadn't told the team, which she knew before she changed. If he answered some questions, he might have been lying, or his answers might have been lies. Still, she didn't know enough about the vampires to even try to guess. She just had to accept the fact that she wouldn't find out anything until he came back. She rolled onto her side and hugged Moriko again. With a light smile, she thought back to her picky eating and smiled. Maybe it was just a psychological thing, but now that she thought about it, she didn't really care. Well, Moriko-chan, she said in a whisper as she looked the wolf in the eyes. She knew it was silly, but at this point she didn't care. It looks like I'm going to die from the blood of women. She kissed the wolf on the nose and then wrapped her arms around it and closed her eyes. Now that she thought about it, she didn't mind the taste of female blood at all. If both types of blood gave the same nutrition, why drink cheap wine, male, when you can drink fine wine, female? She thought there were people who had it worse. Her therapist suggested she take a vacation to clear her mind, and Tsunade agreed. Maybe when Naruto got back, he could tell her a good way to spend it instead of letting her think about what could have happened. I need to stop having such negative thoughts, she said under her breath as she switched to a happier train of thought. Memories of training with her team. Soon, she fell asleep, but her dream was a little different from what she usually has. She had been afraid to sleep lately because she was afraid of having dreams about the mission. She was relieved to find that they were much nicer, but they were still confusing. She had been walking around a town in her last 3 dreams. It looked a bit like Konoha, but there weren't any huge walls around it. Even though the people were nice, no one seemed to notice her, except for one. In all of her dreams, a little girl with silver hair and black eyes, who was probably no more than 9 years old, waved at her before running toward the big white castle in the middle of the town. At first, she only followed because she was also going unnoticed. It wasn't until her second dream, which took place closer to the castle, that she realized the girl was naked. Now she was just inside the castle's doors, looking around at the colors the stained glass windows were throwing everywhere. She felt like she didn't belong there, like the town was neutral territory but the castle wasn't. She moved away slowly and walked back into town. She didn't even notice that Weedabra was smiling behind her in the doorway. When she was with him, the rest of the world didn't matter. Nothing did. She loved him even though he had a demon, was a vampire, and was always hungry. Even though there were red flags, she kissed him passionately, and he could feel his tongue dancing with hers. Moments turned into hours, sounds turned into feelings, and blood turned into shadow. He looked at her warm body and the blood on his hands, but he didn't dare to lick his lips to show how scared he was. He held her body close and cried without tears as the heat left her smiling corpse. No. Naruto yelled and jumped out of bed. His eyes moved all over like crazy as he looked for something to show he was awake. He got down on his knees and put his hands over his eyes to calm down. This was the room he had rented at the Golden Neko, not the house that. "Where the fuck are my cigarettes?" he asked as he stood up and walked over to the table. He lit a cigarette, took a drag, and let the smoke out through his teeth. "This is not the time to lose myself. She's dead, and no amount of crying will change that," he said coldly, pulling out his trench coat. Team 7 left for Konoha the night before, but they probably weren't even halfway there yet. The sun was in the lower west half of the sky, which means it was close to 6 or 7. Before he could keep thinking, a flood of memories hit him. Each one showed a girl he knew but a place he didn't know. He went straight for the shadows, glad to have something to do and a good reason to talk to people. Since the carton of cigarettes was the only thing in the room that was his, he made sure to grab it on his way out. He would pay for it later. Or at all. The last place Shadow Clone was seen. Naruto came out of the shadows, ready to fight. Even though the assassination clone hadn't been used, it remembered blood and battle. He stayed in the shadows as he moved from the hallway into the living room. As soon as he smelled blood, he had Weedabra in his hand. There were a few bodies with cuts that looked like they had been made by an Okatana, but none of them were the girl who had given him a dumpling. Then he heard it, the steady beat of a heart. From the speed, it might have been a little scared, but its owner was alive and well in the next room. He went into the kitchen with his sword drawn until he was sure it wasn't a genjutsu, which would mean it was a trap. "Hikari-chan, are you okay?" he asked as he walked over. As he got closer, he was amazed at how much the festival had changed her. She was bleeding from a cut on her forearm. That sweet, fresh virgin blood was still on her arm, and he had to hold himself back as he kneeled next to her. She looked at him as if he were her savior, then wrapped her arms around his neck and started crying. They came a few minutes ago, she began, barely making sense. He looked over and saw her sister dead on the floor. He thought the man in the living room was her father because he was wearing a kimono. "Calm down, Hikari-chan," he told her, unable to understand her pain. He couldn't understand, and all he wanted was to stay in charge. He looked at her kimono, which was the same one she was wearing the night they met, and saw that the tear in the sleeve was just the right size for what he wanted to do. "Hikari, don't you trust me?" She gave him a nod and let go of her death grip. She had tears and a little blood on her face, but she was fine otherwise. Except for the scared look on her face as the deaths of her sister and father kept happening again and again. "Stay very still, okay? This is going to look very scary," he said, trying to sound comforting or something. She managed a shaky, "yes," and gasped when his long tongue came out of his mouth and stretched about 7 inches from his lips to lick her blood off her arm. He made sure to pull his tongue back before he got too tempted, but he got maybe 7 or 8 minutes worth of her most recent memories from the taste. Think back. She walked down the hall while humming a song that had been stuck in her head for a while. As she got closer to the living room and the room after that, which was her father's office, she heard shouting. Normally, this wouldn't have been strange. Merchants didn't always like the prices he charged to carry their goods with his caravan, and they often told him so. Now, though, sounds of fighting could be heard. As she left the room, her hand wrapped around the unique card in her pocket. She pulled the card out of her pocket. After the sound of a door being thrown open, a man shouted, "Maybe you'll be a little more agreeable after we kill one of your precious daughters." Hikari's eyes got big, and she turned and ran to the kitchen with the card in her hand. She had just walked through the door when a burning pain hit her arm. She screamed and fell over her own feet. She hit the floor hard, afraid to touch her wound. She couldn't do anything but watch as the arm of her kimono became covered in blood. A woman yelled, "Leave her alone," and ran toward the ninja. Before something hit the floor, there was a sound that was almost wet. Hikari looked up in time to see Akira hit the floor with a kunai in her head. She knew that the card was her best chance to stay alive at this point. For a moment, everything else went black as she took the card and put it on the wound. She only knew that her father wasn't with the men because she looked over her shoulder. When she looked down the hall to the living room, she saw that her father was dead. She didn't know when she started crying, but she could feel the tears on her face as she crawled over to her sister's body, afraid to touch her. Before she went over, she heard a poof, but she didn't see or hear anything else. Her family had passed away. End of flashback. "That's not good," he muttered, letting her get another death grip on him. He made a clone and sent it to find out what the ninja were doing here. He didn't think they were hired by angry merchants, and the musical note headbands didn't give him much hope. At this point, Hikari was a crying mess. She cried into his hard chest while her arms were wrapped around his middle. After getting the memories of the clone, the ninja, and her father, he almost regretted gently taking her arms away and helping her stand up, since she didn't have much of a choice. "Hikari, those men came for a reason. They are from a village that is at odds with Konoha, and they were trying to sneak in using next month's caravan. Your father wouldn't let them," he said slowly, getting another shaking nod as the only sign she understood. "But there may be more coming, and since the caravan fell to you, they'll come after you next." Hikari's eyes got big and wide with fear, and she opened her mouth to scream, but nothing came out. "I'm going to take you to Konoha, okay? I'll make sure nothing bad happens to you, but we have to leave soon. We can stay long enough to bind your arm and pack a few things, but not much longer," he said calmly, noticing that she was starting to calm down. He knew that she couldn't shadow travel in this state because the pure darkness would break her mind. Even though running was slower, it was the only choice left. He made a few copies of her, and one of them tore off the rest of her sleeve to use as a bandage. Another tried to comfort her by holding her hand, but Naruto stepped away and disappeared into the shadows, leaving the 6 clones in charge of her. He walked into the Golden Neko's lobby and up to the counter in a way that scared the clerk to death. Room 135 inches was all he said, as if he wasn't in a hurry. He wrote down the amount owed and left. Someone yelling at him to pay for his room as he carried a crying woman out of the village would be a bad idea. It would draw a lot more attention than needed. He walked out into the street and toward the gates of the village, where his clones and Hikari were waiting. Boruto? Someone asked from behind him. No, Naruto. Naruto. She yelled when she remembered the name. The vampire turned around and saw a girl running up to him. He recognized her as Akemi, the waitress he had Sasuke flirt with a few days ago. He said, "I don't know where Sasuke is. He left last night." He waited for her answer. She stopped for a minute to get her breath back. "That's fine. Are you going back to Konoha? Sasuke said you were a ninja there too." "Nice move, Lieutenant Smooth. At least he only knows me as a genin." Cammy knows who she told. "Did he now?" he asked, crossing his arms over his chest. "I plan to leave in about an hour." "Why does that bother you?" she said with a blush. "Look, I really need you to take me with you to Konoha." Naruto looked around, then gently took her arm and led her a few feet into an alley, which was better than being in the crowd. "I'm already carrying more than I want to," he said in a tone that showed how important his situation was. She said a little too loudly, "Please Naruto-san, I need to go to Konoha." When he looked around, all he saw were some sleeping beggars. "Akemi-san, I have a girl whose father and sister were just killed a few feet away from her by ninja who wanted to use her father's caravan to sneak into Konoha. She's weak right now, but she needs to get to Konoha for her own safety, and this may affect Konoha's safety in general." He whispered harshly. "So unless you have a good reason to come, go home." She whispered, with a red face, "I'm pregnant. I've only ever been with one person like that, and from what you say, he's halfway to Konoha." Naruto closed his eyes once and gave a small smile. He was giving Sasuke the title of General Smooth. On his first night with a girl, he gets her pregnant. "And why are you so determined to go?" he asked, already making the clones out of the shadows behind her. I don't believe in abortions. I don't have the money to raise a child by myself, so my father wants us to," she said as her blush got stronger. "Since he got you pregnant, he wants Sasuke to have the decency to marry you." "This should be fun to watch," Naruto said, pointing to the clones behind her. "These clones will take you back to your house and seal whatever you packed into a scroll. I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible." Since he didn't know much about how women have babies, he wondered how she knew so early. Even so, he thought that if they had slept together on their first night, one of the 2 or 3 medical ninjas at the local hospital could have found out if they were skilled enough. When he turned around, the clones had already jumped off with Akemi in one of their arms, doing what she told them to do and showing a level of gentleness that was unusual for a vampire. If everything went well, Hikari and Akemi would both get to the gate at the same time. This would cut down on the time they had to wait. He would go straight and glide over the ground. It might take another 10 minutes, but it would be safer if Akemi was really pregnant. He might not have known much about pregnancy or how fragile the early stages are, but going up and down very quickly for an hour could have hurt her brain, not to mention what it would do to her womb. While he waited for his clones and his cargo, he lit up a cigarette and took a drag. He'd carry Hikari like a bride, since she's getting more and more unconscious, and Akemi could hold onto his neck from behind and wrap her legs around him for more support. At least she could still move her limbs with some control. Hikari was in shock, and it might be days before she could speak or move. Still, that made us worry about where to live. The Namikaze mansion was the most welcoming of the safe places for them. Even if Hinata moved in, neither of them would feed on Hikari, and Akemi would move in with Sasuke even if he didn't want her to. She could still stay with him until Sasuke came back. The only problem was that he had nothing to eat but blood and water from the tap. He made 2 copies of himself and sent them into the shadows. He told one to tell Tsunade what was going on, and he told the other to go get some human food. Akemi called out, "Naruto-san, I'm back." She was at his side in a matter of seconds. The clone put her down and left. As Hikari and a clone walked out of an alley, the clone said, "So are we." She was wrapped in a blue blanket, but she was still shaking pretty hard. The clone gave her to Naruto, who held her like a bride while the clone put the scroll with her things into his trenchcoat and ran away. "Akemi, you need to get on my back. Wrap your arms around my neck and your legs around my waist. Don't worry about choking me, I'm not breathing," he said, turning and crouching down so she could get on. She was unsure at first, but she did what she was told. Even so, her grip on his neck was a little shaky as he stood up. "Akemi, I need to glide as fast as I can, and if you don't hold on, you'll fall off in the middle of the forest and die," he warned, feeling her grip tighten 10 times. "Are you ready? If you get sick when you move, you might want to close your eyes." She said, "I'm ready," and held on a little tighter. She was worried that she might choke him, no matter what he said, but she figured that if he couldn't breathe, he would stop and tell her. She did close her eyes, though. When Naruto took off, he didn't say anything. He called it gliding, because his feet were only about a foot off the ground, but he was going very fast. Akemi stiffened, and if her eyes were open, she might have screamed, but she didn't have any trouble holding on to the vampire. Naruto had to agree that gliding was the most fun way for him to move. Shadow travel was the fastest, and he should only turn into a swarm of bats when he needed to keep an eye on a large area. Running was a good way to get attention that you didn't want. Hikari seemed happy to stay shocked and quiet, and Akemi didn't seem to mind that it was windy. The trip itself gave Naruto a sudden moment of clarity that almost made him throw up. He was carrying 2 female virgins, technically one virgin and one that still smelled like a virgin, and they were both alive despite the urge to drink. Many ways to hurt them came to mind, but they were so easy to dismiss that he almost dropped Hikari. Now is not the time for such news, he muttered as he tightened his grip on the girl in his arms. His eyes were wide, but he narrowed them. Akemi yelled from behind him, "What did you say?" He couldn't hear him over the wind. She didn't get a response, so she tightened her grip and fought the urge to open her eyes. For a while, they just sat there in silence. Naruto did notice that Hikari's eyes were starting to tear up again. Maybe she was starting to come out of her shock and get back to reality. All she was going to see was Naruto's face, upper torso, the darkening sky, and the rushing treetops, so it wasn't going to be a big deal. Soon, they could see the walls of Konoha. Naruto decided not to go through the gate, so he walked up to the wall and jumped. As Naruto flew over the guards on the wall, he said, "Good evening, gentlemen." One of the new people ran over to push the alarm button, but his boss stopped him. "Don't worry, rookie. That was Naruto-sama. He's on our side," he said, not even bothering to look for the black dot that would show his speeding form. "But no, sir. Trust me, only Naruto can jump over the wall," he said as he sat back down. "He's probably already at the Hokage's office, or he will be by the time I finish this sentence." The newcomer looked toward the village and wondered what kind of monster could be so fast and able to jump so high. But Naruto wasn't on his way to the Hokage's office. In a way, the older guard was right, because he had reached his destination by the time he finished his sentence. However, the hospital was closer to the wall than the Hokage's office. Naruto put the girl on the bed and told Tsunade, "This is the girl whose family was killed." They were in the last room of the hospital, where Tsunade would treat her arm and try to get her out of shock. "You can now let go, Akemi." She first let go with her legs, then slowly let go of his neck until her feet were on the ground. At first, she seemed a little shaky, but that went away quickly. "So this is the one Sasuke had?" Tsunade asked as she took Hikari out of her wrappings. Akemi seemed angry, but she didn't say anything. Naruto sent a clone ahead to explain everything. "Don't worry, he'll marry you even if I have to tell him to." When Akemi heard the comment, she knew that the woman making it was the Hokage, so she blushed. She looked at Naruto and saw that he was calm. I take it that vacation did what it was supposed to do? Tsunade asked, noticing that he was calm even though there were 3 women in a small room with him. He had always liked the blood of women. She almost laughed out loud because it looked like he and Hinata were about to fight over the blood. The urge is there, but it's easy to stop. Do you want Akemi to stay at the Namikaze estate until Sasuke arrives? He asked, glad he had put on his trench coat again before going to sleep. It helped him feel a little bit better. It shouldn't be more than a few hours, Tsunade said, healing Hikari's arm. I'd like her to stay with me until then, because Team 7 has to report when they get back. I'll tell Sasuke about the situation then. Even though it was deep, Naruto tied it so that it wouldn't bleed her to death. Hikari, is that her name? She asked, pointing to the girl on the bed. Naruto answered, yes. Tsunade said, once she's feeling better, I'd like you to protect her. I know you're busy with Hinata, but she'll be a target if the next big caravan coming into Konoha needs her permission. Naruto asked, when does Hinata get to check out? He was mad at himself for forgetting her on his way over here. Your plan is fine with me, he quickly added. Tonight, I think I saw Kurenai and Kiba in the lobby about a half hour ago, waiting for the official checkout time. Tsunade smiled as she looked up from her newly healed arm. Go ahead, these 2 are fine with me, and I think you should explain yourself to your team. Naruto went into the shadows without saying a word, leaving only the 3 girls in the room. That was weird, said Akemi, who had never seen a person just stand there. Just go away like that. Tsunade had a laugh. You should go see him on Halloween. Naruto is there. The receptionist took the papers back from Kurenai and said, thank you. She had taken the girl out of the hospital because she was her teacher. Naruto stood in the shadows and looked at the 3, trying to figure out how they felt. Kurenai seemed a little wary of the girl because she looked a little like Naruto, but she was very happy to see her alive and well. Kiba looked relieved, but he also looked a little tired. This was probably because he hadn't slept well after his first kills. He probably didn't see Hinata get turned by Naruto's fangs, so he didn't seem as afraid of her, but he stayed away from her when asked to. Hinata herself struck a deep chord in Naruto, which made him think of 2 different memories at the same time. He stopped thinking that way and took on her shape and stance. The vampirism had taken away what little fat was left on her body, and her face didn't look hollow like many vampires' faces do. Tsunade must have fed her well. She looked about an inch taller and more slender, but otherwise she seemed to be the same Hinata. Obviously, the distance between her and Kiba, the only man in the room, and the stuffed wolf she held in her left arm showed that they were different. Alright, Hinata, are you ready to go? Asked Kurenai. Hinata could tell by the color of her eyes that she was still the same student she had taught because she was still the same person. She knew it had something to do with Naruto's bite that brought him back to life, but she didn't know what. She said, yes, but I wish Naruto was here. He said he would try to be here. Then she felt something behind her, like something had moved. She turned around and was surprised and happy to see her master, but the word, master, made her stop. And here I am, he said to the girl with a smile. I'm sorry for being gone, but it was necessary, he told his whole team. When Kiba was about to ask the same thing, Kurenai asked, where have you been? Her voice was sharp, and she didn't seem too happy to see how calm he was. There are a lot of things to answer, Kurenai-chan, and most of them aren't good for the public to hear, he said, seeing Kurenai blush at the word, chan. Come. My house is quiet and private, and I promise to answer all of your questions there. Naruto walked by them on his way to the door and waved for them to follow him. Hinata did it in a flash, and Kiba wasn't far behind. Kurenai was a little upset when a student called her Chan, but after a moment of thought, she followed. Even if she had to get Enko to question him, she was going to find out how he saved Hinata. He showed them the quickest way to get to his house. He told them that he had lived at the Namikaze estate before getting his C rank, but that he had never invited them to visit. Each person had their own ideas about how it would look. Hinata thought it would be decorated in black and red, with gothic, bat, and crypt themes everywhere, because she knew what he was. And a grave. Kurenai thought it might look a bit like a typical bachelor pad, with a few pornographic magazines on the floor and a sink full of dirty dishes. Kiba thought the same way, but he liked the idea a little more than his teacher did. After walking for 10 or 12 minutes, they finally got through the gates and were standing in front of his door. He opened the door and ducked through it without any dramatic pause. Hinata was wrong about how dark the design was, and Kiba and Kurenai were wrong about how dirty it was. The room he led them into was big. A bar with a few stools stood between it and a small kitchen. The room itself had a big gray sofa with 2 armchairs on either side and a coffee table in front of it. On the other side, there was a gray love seat and a pair of armchairs that looked the same. Naruto walked over to the 2 armchairs and sat in the one between the other armchair and the love seat. He then put Weedabra against the side of the chair. Kiba sat in the chair to the right of the sofa, while Hinata and Kurenai sat on opposite ends of the large sofa. Ask any question, and I'll try to answer it to the best of my ability. But I'll answer any question honestly, so don't ask questions you don't want to know the answer to, he said, trying to be funny and lighten the mood. Kiba took it for what it was worth and smiled. Hinata knew what he meant but still smiled, and Kurenai kept her slightly annoyed face. Tell me why you thought it was a good idea to fight a camp of 50 bandits, she said. Naruto nodded and pulled out a cigarette, which he lit before getting started. I've taken out camps of 150 of the scum by myself before, so it seemed like 50 would be a piece of cake with 3 other people, he said with a straight face. Kurenai didn't appear to be happy. Naruto-san, I'd like you to answer seriously, because that was by far the dumbest thing I've ever seen. I answered with all seriousness, Naruto said. Then he took a drag and let the smoke out of his teeth before going on. On to the next one. Kurenai replied, why shouldn't I write you up for disobedience or something similar? Maybe because I'm better than you, he said, his eyes narrowing. Special Junins are better than regular Junins, and even though Anbu has its own ranking system, an Anbu captain is better than a Junin. Couldn't she just have a little faith? Wah. My name is Naruto Hellsing Namikaze. I'm the captain of the Anbu and a special Junin. My alias is Nosferatu the Damned, and I'm Konoha's top killer, he said in a voice that left no room for argument. I'm on a mission from Tsunade to keep Sasuke Uchiha from falling into Orochimaru's hands and to protect Hinata. As she can tell you, I failed horribly at the latter, he said, as shadows twisted around him. From her sword, Weedabra's voice said, calm down, Naruto. The sword came out of its sheath a little bit, letting a dark cloud flow out and cover the blade as it rose up. Then it seemed to fall back to the ground, leaving Weedabra standing next to her wielder. Naked like always. Naruto groaned and walked to the kitchen. Great. Nothing like a sword turning into a naked loli to really clear things up. Weedabra looked at the other 3 and sheepishly scratched the back of her head. You'll have to forgive him. He hasn't eaten in a while, so he's a little cranky, Weedabra said in a cute way, forgetting that these people were used to seeing a naked 9-year-old. Hinata saw the little loli and said, wait. You're the girl from my dreams. Kiba looked at her with his eyebrows raised. He asked, you dream about naked little girls? And got a pillow thrown at him from the couch. No. I mean that I've been having some weird dreams lately, and she's been in all of them. She said, feeling a little uneasy about the way Kiba and Kurenai were looking at her. She has a name, you know. Weedabra's sweat dropped. Why did everybody always act this way? I'm Weedabra, Naruto's katana and future lover. She said, adding the last part a little too happily. Not for at least 300 years, you era loli, Naruto called from the kitchen as he looked through the fridge for some AB+. Or an O. Oh, come on. It's not like we're being tortured. The other people love all the sex we have. Oh, others? Kurenai's eye twitched as he asked. She had, of course, taken the whole thing the wrong way. Widabra figured out what was going on and put her hands up as a sign of peace. Look, I'm just as complicated as Naruto. Let's all just sit down and talk about this calmly, okay? She had to use their cute looks to get them to at least agree to be quiet until Naruto came back. He did come back in after about a minute. With 5 packs of blood. He gave Hinata one. He said, "Drink up," and put the other packs on the table. He let out a sigh and put out his cigarette. "Listen, everything I tell you will require a leap of faith and a fair amount of open-mindedness," he said, biting off the tip of a blood pack and spitting it into the trash. "First of all, I'm sorry for getting angry. Second, I'm sorry if this scares you," he said with a smile as he put the hole between his lips and turned his head back to let the blood drain down his throat. The act made Kurenai pale, and Kiba's face turned a little green. Hinata, on the other hand, was thirsty herself as Naruto drank. She looked at the bag she was holding and sighed. She bit off the end of the bag, but she quickly pulled it out of her mouth. Kurenai saw the movement as she turned the bag on its side, and when she looked over, she saw innocent Hinata drinking blood. Male, age 23, type AB+, balanced diet, Naruto said just loud enough for them to hear after taking the pack from his lips. He waited until Hinata was done before going on, even though the dragoness was blushing because she had drunk in front of her friends. "Now, to put it simply, I'm a vampire. I live off the blood of humans, and if I drink directly from a virgin, I can turn them into a vampire. As you can see, I had to do this to save Hinata's life." "Sort of." Hinata asked, still red-faced, "What do you mean, technically?" Naruto smiled and scratched the back of his head as he laughed. "Well, you're dead. Technically, you're undead. Have you ever wondered why you weren't hooked up to an EKG or something?" he asked. "I know this sounds horrible and hard to believe, but it's true. There are only 3 vampires in the world, me, Hinata, and... well, I won't say who." He said this with a lot of sadness in his voice. Kiba took a deep breath and rubbed his temples, looking completely lost. "Okay, so you're both technically dead, and you're an Anbu captain with the rank of Special Junin who is also Konoha's most feared and famous assassin," he said with a defeated look on his face. He thought that if he wanted to hurt them, he would have killed them by now. "Well, I'm 20 years old, but you didn't say that," Naruto said as he lit another cigarette. "Once again, Kurenai-chan, I'm sorry for getting angry. I hadn't eaten in about 24 hours, and a lot has happened recently. It's... okay, I guess," she said, sounding a little bit embarrassed. "But could you tell me about the naked girl standing next to you? And while we're talking about clothes, could you put some on? My name is Widabra, and I don't want to put clothes on my beautiful body," she said, crossing her arms over her cup. Widabra is unique in many ways. For one, she is a sentient sword, and she helped me find her when I was 10. The reason she looks the way she does is because she believes that there is a time right before physical maturity when, and this is a short summary of a long rant, innocence blurs the lines of good and evil. So, she takes on that form. "And the others she mentioned?" asked Kurenai, trying to stay as calm as possible. "I'm 4,568 years old and have had many wielders. When a wielder impresses me with their heart or soul, I offer them a way to avoid death. When they die, instead of death taking their souls, I keep them. Their bodies still die, of course, so I give them perfect bodies like mine." Basically, she means small versions of them, Naruto quickly added. "Right. Since they usually come from bloody times, I offer them a simpler life. There are no hidden motives or enemies with me. There is only what makes you happy, and what doesn't. I give them love and sex, food and wine. Whatever they want to keep them happy and comfortable. I conform to their sexual desires as much as they do to mine. Naruto sighed as Widabra hit him on the arm and asked, "Do you see what I have to put up with? You didn't seem to mind when you walked in on Taraka and me earlier." "You stood there for a long time," she said with a triumphant grin. "Most people freeze up when they see something that seems wrong or strange." "I wasn't watching because I was scared," Naruto groaned as he looked at his team. "Do any of you people know what a mindscape is?" "Yes, it's how a person's mind looks. Usually, only the person whose mind it is can see it." "Why?" asked Kurenai with a raised eyebrow. "To use genjutsu, you sometimes had to use someone else's mindscape against them and keep your own mindscape safe. Mine is a big white castle. It's not even close to a sacred space. I've got Kyuubi brooding and throwing fits in the dungeon, Alucard brooding in his room down there, and I've got this little pervert always having sex with her lovers, or her lovers are fucking amongst themselves. Do you know how weird it is to walk into a room meant for quiet meditation and see two lawless fucking?" Kiba asked, "Naruto, I don't think I really want to know, but what are you talking about?" This was way too strange. Taraka is a futa. She has a vagina and a penis, and an 8-inch one at that. She's pretty nervous about it, too. It took us a century to get her to use it, but damn, she can use it. Kurenai rubbed her own temples and asked, "Let me get this straight. You're a vampire, an Ambu captain with the rank of Special Junin, a master assassin, and you've been pretending to be a genin on orders. You have the Kyuubi sealed into you, along with someone I've never heard of, and your sword is a horny loli who likes pedophilia and futanari." Widabra and Naruto looked at each other for a moment before looking away. "Yep, that's about it," Naruto said, though he didn't think Widabra would let it go. "You know, there are some things that shouldn't be said in a voice like yours," Naruto moaned, facepalming. Widabra gave a shrug. "If it bothered you a lot, you wouldn't use me. You might not like to watch, but it doesn't bother you that a bunch of lawless are having hot, kinky lesbian sex in the corners of your mind. Each to his or her own. Fucking in front of me or in the throne room is against the rules." Naruto asked her, "Now, if you're done trying to make me sound like a pedo and or scaring my teammates, could you go away and wait out your time limit?" At times, he loved her so much that he wanted to kill her, and at other times, he wished he could kill her. "Oh, loli. Time limit?" Hinata asked, trying to ignore the last few minutes of talk. Widabra can bring herself or any of her lovers into the real world, but they have to stay for at least an hour and can't go back before the hour is up. They can stay after the hour is up, so it's not really a time limit, but I can't use Widabra's sword form if she's out in the real world fucking one of her girlfriends. Speaking of which, if you want to call them, go to the room you used last time. I don't want to have to clean a new room every time you 10 get horny. Thanks for permission." The darkness spirit yelled as it ran down the hall. "I swear to Kami that girl will kill me." "Oh, wait, I'm already dead," Naruto said as he drained another packet of blood. "Can you see why she doesn't show up that much? When people find out that a vampire's sword has a lolicon darkness spirit, they never take him seriously again," he said. Change of subject, Kiba said suddenly, moving around uncomfortably. Who is that other guy you were talking about? Alucard or what?" Alucard was the king of no life. It's the name given to the vampire who is the strongest and oldest. He was the last person still alive, and he died to save mine. So, I became the king of no life and he died. Most of him, at least. When I drink someone's blood, I get their soul and memories. His soul moved on, but for some reason, part of Alucard lived on in his memories. That part now spends his days brooding in the dungeon, by his own choice, I might add. You're the strongest vampire? Is Hinata your vampire bride or something? Kiba asked, which made the heiress blush. No, that makes her my chick. Once she pins a human to the ground and drinks their blood directly from them, she will be a real vampire and won't have to do what I say anymore. Still, those orders and her will are the only things that are keeping you two from being killed and drained, Naruto said to Hinata with a sorry smile. I see the stuffed animal is still with you. Is it helpful? Yes, it did happen, and it still does. I called her Moriko, Hinata said, a little red in the face. She couldn't help but look longingly at the two blood packs that were still there, but she quickly looked away. Drink if you're thirsty. Tsunade gives me a lot of blood, which you are welcome to take. If it works for you, you can move in here. If not, I can give you your coffin to take back to the Hyuga estate, he said as he slid a blood pack over. Hinata asked, see coffin? Because she didn't know what to say. Naruto got up and walked away, leaving Hinata standing in the blood. Even though she had just drunk, her thirst got worse when she saw that it had been given by a woman. She stopped herself because she didn't want to make her friends look scared again. Kurenai asked the girl, who was looking longingly at the bag, how badly do you want it? Imagine not drinking for days or even weeks. Then, picture a glass of cool water sitting on a rock in the middle of a desert. Hinata asked back, how badly do you want to drink? Naruto-kun told me that I can't drink from humans or hurt anyone unless I'm protecting myself. Right now, I want to reach out and rip your throat out. Please don't look scared. I want to drain every drop of blood from your body, she whispered as she reached out for the packet and broke her will. Kurenai and Kiba both turned away from the girl to give her some space. Naruto and the huge coffin he was carrying gave them a chance to think about something else. He put it down on its narrow end, making the room shake with its weight, and waited for Hinata to finish so she could see his work. In order to keep their strength up, vampires must sleep in coffins filled with the dirt from where they were born. You can go without food for a few nights, but not for long, Naruto said as he opened the coffin's door. Hinata stared at the huge coffin. It was as tall as Naruto, and before he opened it, she saw that the door was black like the rest of it, but the lid had a white crescent moon on it. She found the purple silk and pillow inside to be strangely appealing, though she could roll around and scrunch up if she wanted to. Like a bed with a cover. I know the size might be a little too much, but I thought you might like the room. If you want it to fit better later in life, you can change your body after you've taken the souls of a few people. He said. But I can tell you'd rather put that off for a while, right? Yes, please. Hinata said as she started to see the coffin in a different way. It did look like a lot of fun. Then, do you want to know what you can do right now? Blood packs in the coffin won't make you stronger, but they will keep your powers from getting worse. He said this after Draculina gave him a nod. In short, you're faster and stronger than humans. You won't get shadow powers until you drink from a human, but right now, a Juken strike could go right through your opponent's chest, he said. Come here to get your casket. Why, you can't really mean that. She complained, that thing is huge. Hinata, come here and lift up your coffin. He said, you can do it, then closed the door and took a step back. The girl sighed and walked over, looking back and forth between her coffin and her Moriko-chan. Hinata said, I don't want to put Moriko down. She knew it was bad for a kunoichi to have one hand full, especially if that hand was full of a stuffed animal. But she wouldn't put the wolf down. Then pick it up with one hand. Naruto pointed to the coffin and said, try. Hinata sighed and moved closer to the coffin. She put one arm around it and just barely grabbed the far side with the other. Lift. She almost threw it through the roof, but she quickly figured out what she was doing wrong and put the huge box of wood and metal on her shoulder. She tried to say something as she stared at Naruto with wide eyes. How can I? This isn't possible, she said, barely noticing the weight of the coffin. Naruto pointed to the wolf and said, Hinata-chan, I understand your connection to Moriko. I'm good at getting blood out of clothes, so until you learn how to use the Juken with one hand and don't get blood on her, you can bring her to me to wash, he said with a smile. Hinata had to think about it for a moment before she understood, but when she did, she smiled and almost jumped for joy. She could still be a good kunoichi and keep Moriko with her. She yelled with joy, "Thank you, Naruto-kun. Fuck me even harder, damn it." The four ninja turned to see where the voice was coming from. It didn't sound like Weedabra. A young girl came out of the hallway and said, "Excuse me," in a shy voice. She was about 4 feet 3 inches tall and had fair skin. Her hair was the color of a leaf and fell to the back of her knees. Her eyes were the color of ice. She had soft features and her ears were pointy. She also had nothing on. "I'm sorry, but the door opened on its own," she said with a bow. "Don't worry, Taliana. Just go make sure it's shut, or Rinya might talk to us again," Naruto said in a soft voice. The elf girl blushed but kept her smile. "Okay." She blushed when she realized there were other people in the room and said, "Good night to you and sorry," she stutteringly said as she ran away. Naruto said, "Taliana is very self-conscious around strangers. Still, she's a very sweet girl." "And how do you know this?" Kurenai asked, raising an eyebrow. "Because I don't dream when I sleep, I often avoid their sex games in my Mindscape. But Taliana will always wake up before her lovers, whether in my Mindscape or in our world, and bring them breakfast." He shrugged and said, "She's also the one who got the rest of them to help me clean the rooms they use. When you really look into it, it seems like there's a little more love than sex," Kiba said with a blink. Naruto laughed and threw his head back as if it were the funniest thing ever. "I know them better than you do. It's hard to tell the difference between love and sex, which is probably what Weedabra wants, but it's about the same amount of each. Given how much sex there is, there's also a lot of love," he said, softening his tone. "Once you get to know them, they are nice, but I thank Weedabra every single day for making them so young. No periods, no mood swings, and no crazy hormones. My mind is as calm as it could be given the circumstances. I'm fucking scumming." Naruto finished by facepalming and saying, "Stances. Sorry," called Taliana from the hallway, but she didn't come out. "I was going to give you hell for having a sword like that," Kurenai said, "but it seems to be doing the job for me." She had to agree with him, though, that there were some things that shouldn't be said in a child's voice. Another girl walked out of the hall as if on cue. She was exactly 5 feet tall, and her silver hair fell to her collarbone and framed her face. She had a little bit of a tan, and her eyes were a bright yellow. She had wolf ears on her head, and a wolf tail grew out of her behind. Except for the black leather collar around her neck, she was naked. She put her hands on her hips and asked, "Naru, do you have any condoms?" Kurenai gave herself a facepalm and added one more word to the list. "I thought Takara didn't make sperm because she's not. Why then do you?" "Don't bother. I'll help clean it up, but that's how we show that room is our sex room," she said, smiling and waving her fingers at the other 3 ninjas. "My room, the top drawer of the table that looks like a coffin. I'll never be able to get the stains out, right?" he asked, having a vague idea of what they were going to do. She said, "Not a chance in hell," and then skipped to the door to the basement. "Okay, let's leave before this starts," Naruto said as he headed for the door that led outside. Hinata followed a short distance behind, having to move the coffin carefully, and the other 2 followed close behind, closing the door behind them. "Do you have to deal with that every day?" Kurenai asked the vampire, feeling sorry for him. They were modest today. "The first time I let them out into the real world was when I was 12, and an hour later, Luciana, the werewolf you just saw, came up to me covered in female poop and whatever Takara shoots out of her dick, because it's not semen, and asked me where the bathroom was. It's not the weirdest thing I've seen them do, but it's up there," he said, leaning against a tree and lighting another cigarette. "And I have a feeling they're about to have the worst water balloon fight ever." Kiba asked, "What makes you think that?" The answer was a groan. Wediabra has told us a lot about her lovers. Naruto said, "Trust me, it's going to be scary." "What's the worst that could happen?" asked Hiba, who had no idea what could go wrong. Takara can both ejaculate like a man and have more than one orgasm like a woman. They will put a condom on her, fill it up, and do this again and again until they run out of condoms. Then they'll have a very weird water balloon fight, if you can call it that, he said as he saw Kiba's face turn a little pale. Heck, they all looked a little strange. Now, to get away from the raging lolicons, let's go get some dinner. I'm sure food will help bury this memory so deeply that none of us will remember it. Until they show up again. As he led his team out of the estate, he groaned. He only wanted an alcoholic drink. Or maybe just a drunk person.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.